I am going to give you, no, not you, essential tips to run a successful convention game.
I love this place!
Well, it is convention season, at least our convention season. I just got back from probably one of the smaller conventions you would ever go to, and that is VengerCon. And Mrs. D and I had a blast there. It was great gaming for a couple days straight. No distractions or anything like that, just good solid games run by good solid people. And I got to run one myself, and I thought it went off fairly well. Now, in about a week, less than a week actually, as I film this, we are going to be at Gen Con. And as opposed to VengerCon, of course, everybody knows Gen Con is one of the biggest conventions. Probably it is the biggest convention, role-playing wise, in the world. I have run games at Gen Con before. I'm not going to be running anything this time. And I have learned a couple of things over the years, and I'm going to try to impart that wisdom to you right now. I'm going to give you some tips to help make your convention game a success. And there is a difference. I think it's a different kind of approach to run a convention game versus your normal game, where you have the benefit of some time and perhaps some friends who will understand you. So without further ado, let's get into some of the tips that I think you should learn if you're going to run a successful convention game. Okay, the first thing, and this probably is the most important, is that you have to give every player at your table at a convention a chance to, maybe not shine, that's a little too hokey, but you have to give them a chance to do something consequential. So let's stick to fantasy RPGs. If a person or a couple of people are fighters, you better darn well throw some villains at them that they can fight and use their abilities. If you have a thief, you got to give them the chance to sneak around a little bit, maybe disarm a trap, find a secret door, something along those lines. Like a cleric or a monk or anything like that, give them a chance to be holy, to maybe give a speech, give out a buff or two, perhaps to turn undead, something along those lines. Now, you're not guaranteeing them success. You never should do that, even at a convention game. That's really just wrong. But you really need to go out of your way to find situations, either organically or, if it's kind of more towards the start, even if it's planned, just a way for them to do something to kind of get them involved right away. And actually, the sooner the better for this. Obviously, combat is going to involve everyone. So if you're going to do a convention game, starting in media res, right in the middle of action, is never a half bad idea. Hey guys, you all know each other. You find yourself staring down these brigands. Why don't we just roll for combat? These guys are out for your blood, and there's going to be no quarter given. You know that. And then I will tell you what's going on afterwards. So it kind of gets everybody like, oh, okay, I understand this. We're going to go into combat, and I'm going to kill some things. And then afterward, then you kind of do your exposition, for the background, and then maybe what's going to happen, going forward, ostensibly. So yes, very important. You got to give them the chance to do something. You don't give them a guaranteed success, but you give them the opportunity to succeed. Okay, if you do this long enough, you're going to run across a disruptive player, maybe even an autistic player. I actually had the latter. I had an autistic player at a Gen Con game I ran several years back. I had no prior experience dealing with this, so I kind of did it by the seat of my pants. I think I did an okay job. One of the players that was helping me clean up afterwards said I kind of handled the situation and the person perfectly. He was just a guy that came to the table. He's probably more like a younger kid. I could kind of tell maybe there was a little something going on there. He was nice enough, but he would just kind of talk out of turn, kind of interrupt, talk while I was talking. And I think the best way to handle this is first of all, don't ever lose your cool. Don't ever lose your cool at the table, unless you want to be the subject of like a crit crab video or something like that. Always keep your cool. You want to be forceful though. Okay, so when he kept interrupting me, and I kind of knew what I was dealing with, I just kind of had to turn to him, and I didn't scream it, but enough people at the table heard it. I said, brother, I said, you got to let me do my job as a DM. I have to explain what's going on to everybody else. I promise I will get to you in a moment. And you know what? It worked. He just kind of went, okay. He didn't really do much of that afterward. And he kind of maybe separated his character too from the group, which was a little bit easier, because then I would be like, okay, hey buddy, I'm going to get to you. We're going to get to see what your guy's doing in just a moment. I'm going to get to all these guys. And he was fine, actually. He was not really disruptive. You just kind of tell he wasn't real big, with the social cues or anything. But he didn't mean any harm. So I think the key is just to kind of be forceful, but with a smile on your face, and just say, hey, this is kind of what we have to do. We're all kind of here together. Let's make sure everybody has a good time. Everybody can kind of be heard, and there's no awkwardness. So we're gonna follow these rules at the table if that's okay. And more often than not, I think people are gonna want to comply and maybe not stick out. Maybe they don't realize they're being disruptive, or look, if they are and they're just being hopelessly disruptive, call for a 5-minute break, or a 10-minute break, and pull that guy aside and just say, hey man, you're really kind of bumming me out here. Is there anything I can do to help you, or is this just not working for you? And if it's not working for you, go in peace. Good Lord, if their ticket costs $2 or $4, just give them the $2 or $4 back and just say, go on, go in peace, and then just have a good time with the rest of the table. One way to handle it. You probably are going to run across something like this at some point. Just be prepared. It'll be a little surprising at first, but I think you'll be able to deal with it better than you probably imagine. One of the most important things to remember at a convention game is pacing. You as the DM have to have an in-game clock and an out-of-game clock. The last thing you want is for the 4 hours to be up and the party be nowhere near their goal. Now, sure, you can fudge things and just bring the bad guy to them, and while that does give some sort of closure, the players are probably going to recognize it as a last-minute desperate move. You don't have the luxury you normally have with your regular gaming group, and that is time. So a quick story demonstrating this. While it wasn't a convention game, I remember when one of my players was about to move, unfortunately. So he wanted to take the reins and DM Spycraft for one last time before he left. No problem. He said he needed 3 sessions for it. Now, in the middle of session 3, we were looking at each other, as it was pretty clear nothing much was going on, and we didn't seem near any sort of in-game conclusion. So he ended the session, and when we were saying our goodbyes, we asked how close we were to actually finishing the game or attaining our goals in it. And he told us, oh, you guys weren't close at all. You would have had to go to Spain and capture a spy and then bring him back to the US before you even had a shot at fighting the bad guy. So we were a little puzzled after he left why he was so ambitious to run something that he couldn't possibly finish. But I could also sense, as I looked back on those sessions, many missed opportunities on his part to speed things along. His problem was that he didn't keep front and center the fact that he was racing against a ticking clock. So at a convention game, it's really no different. You can allow the players, of course, to plan and commiserate in character, but you also want to encourage action when they seem to come to some sort of consensus. And don't be afraid to hand-wave certain unimportant things. For example, if a high-level party runs afoul of a group of pretty low-level monsters that they would normally have no problem with, you can always just kind of narrate that encounter, or maybe run it a few rounds, and then After that, the PCs just take care of business and, that obstacle is overcome. And just to be clear, I'm not saying to do this stuff in your regular game. I'm saying to maybe do it, if need be, at a convention game. Because at a convention game, there's just not much fun for people to slog through a combat where the outcome is just so plainly obvious. Combats in a convention game should be meaningful. As I mentioned earlier, starting in the middle of the action to get the players involved right away. Or the combat should be a real challenge. A useless cakewalk right in the middle of the session is probably the worst possible thing that can happen in your convention game. Don't be afraid if things go off the rails because the PCs have figured everything out. While this also applies, of course, to your regular game, it's doubly important for a convention game. Players must be rewarded for figuring things out. If they beat your big baddie way too soon, think of some logical consequences that might occur as a result. Take a short 10-minute break and then regroup. Maybe you can advance the characters 15 years into the future. Give them a couple of quick levels to add on. And maybe that big baddie had a kid or a henchman who's been plotting revenge all that time. First you allow the players to narrate what's been going on in their characters' lives over the last 15 years. Then you get them all together in one place, maybe a castle for a 15-year reunion or something like that, and then boom, the son of the bad guy strikes. Or maybe the original villain had powerful allies who come to some sort of political power in the year or years after, and now the PCs find themselves hunted by the authorities. Regardless, don't ever feel you need to fudge away the ingenuity of players. They'll be happy they accomplished their goal, and how you handle it afterwards may kick your game into being an all-timer. So now I want to give you just some practical tips that I've discovered running games and playing in games over the years. You should always have a list of setting-specific male and female names that you can use off the cuff, as well as a few businesses like inns or tavern names. Don't get caught calling an NPC Joe Bob because your brain is just fried. Be prepared with a few extra characters just in case one or two die way too early. I remember running a Star Wars game at a Gen Con years back for a group of really good guys who actually bought all the tickets for my game. But they actually had a 7th player who was in their group. And my initial maximum was 6. But they politely asked if I could squeeze him in. And of course I said yes. And they were really, really thankful. And we all had a really, really good time. So be a little flexible when it comes to that kind of stuff. Now, if the PCs are near the end of the game and one dies, it might be a little too late to introduce a new character, which is why you should always have a few minimally invasive henchmen or gophers schlepping the PC's gear. You can always give the player of the now fallen PC control of that henchman. Just have them do a few quick stats, and then they can still participate in the combat, and who knows, maybe they'll even make that final killing blow. You got to also remember that big convention halls can get quite loud. You need to be able to project your voice. If you're normally soft-spoken, practice a little bit in the days before projecting but not yelling. This is also why Theater of the Mind is good, but it never hurts to have a dry erase mat to kind of draw things out really quick in case a couple of the players are having a hard time hearing you over the din of the room. And if you are mapping for the player's benefit, remember that you don't need to waste time drawing a scale exact map. You need to give a rough idea of what the PCs are seeing, and you can just tell them that, hey, this hallway is 10 feet wide, while that room that I just drew is 50 by 50. Don't try to draw it out exactly. You only need to do that for the specific area that a combat is occurring in if you're using miniatures. And by the way, for recent conventions, I've found these as super useful. These are paper miniatures that I bought from James at Neckbeardia, and they take up very little room. And I also use these wooden blocks that I've painted up, and they can be used to show walls or a little bit of battlefield height when necessary. They're very versatile, and it kind of gives a very basic 3D version of what's going on that the players can kind of fill in their own minds. Okay, so one other thing you can do, and I do this now, not all the time, but a lot of the time, is have a little giveaway at the end of your convention game. Sometimes I'll give away a book. You could, do likewise, or give away a gift certificate or something like that. Something that lets the players know that you appreciate them coming to your game, hopefully doing a good job, and you guys all having a good time. You could give it away in any way you want. Sometimes random is kind of just the best. In other words, just have the players just put their name down on a slip of paper, put it in a hat, and just have someone draw it out. You could nominate like a player of the game, have the players vote on a player of the game, and that person wins the prize. Or maybe they vote for the player of the game, and that person just gets maybe like one extra chance. They get to put their name in twice. I guess however you want to handle it. But this is something that I've always found that players really appreciate. And even if they don't win, I think they're usually happy, for the person who did. So this is just another way that players are going to remember the experience they had at your table. Now finally, as a DM, you should be having a moderately good time yourself, but not too good of a time while you're running the game. It's the same advice I give brides and grooms at their wedding. You want them to enjoy it, of course, and always remember it. But they also need to realize that they have obligations like greeting as many guests as possible. It's kind of the same way with a convention game. You need that little bit of cold detachment to make sure you're not forgetting, well, for one, any of the tips I just gave you. Now, afterwards, you can breathe a sigh of relief, and hopefully your players will have had a fantastic time. And by the way, one thing I have learned is that there are just some people out there who exist solely to rain on other people's parades. They almost get off on it, and there's really nothing you can do about it. If you have a group where everyone is excited and happy at the end, but there's one Eeyore who's, mumbling and shaking his head because he wasn't the star or he didn't get to, make the final blow, you're just going to have to realize that that's life. And you really can't do anything to help that person. Celebrate with the rest of the group on a job well done, and you're just going to have to forget about that person, and I hate to say it, let them be alone in their misery. Well, I hope you liked this quick video. If you did, please let me know by hitting that thumbs up button, wouldn't you? You can also comment and let me know any of your tips, your do's or don'ts for a convention game. Also, you could make sure that you are subscribed to this channel. I would really appreciate that. And I hope you'll join us Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for The Lair. That's our weekly live stream where me and a few friends go over RPG news of the week and talk to interesting people. In the past, we've had on folks like Sandy Peterson and the legendary Rob Kuntz. And sometimes at the end, we even sneak in a little bit of live play. So I always hope that we will see you there. Okay, well, that's all for now. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. And until we talk again, goodbye.